What's going on, everybody? It's Ted again with the Countdown City Geeks, and I have another special interview for you guys. Writer, director of the brand new suspenseful thriller Boneyard, Asif Akbar. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. You have been inspired by some true crime stories, and the American audience, they're absolutely obsessed with true crime stories, but this is a very dark one because this is a true crime story that's gone on for quite some time. Your movie Boneyard, inspired by the real life finding of a it's almost sort of a mass grave of victims with no one ever to be convicted of these killings. Tell us about what inspired you to write this story with this team regarding this true crime that happened back in 2009.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, you're right. It was inspired largely from the West Mesa murders case from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but also coupled in with, several different true crime stories, cases of, these serial killer cases that are very similar. And we've taken pieces from, different cases to kind of mold this a story together and use it more of like an educational piece that can bring awareness to the public in a more generalized scenario of how these cases are handled, especially also from the law enforcement's perspectives and all the
Absolutely.
different layers that are involved in, investigating these cases and then how it can affect those law enforcement personnel, individually, and then how it affects the families and, what really goes on behind the scenes sometimes, along with the realism of my goal with this was to keep it very realistic in the style that we structured the story with the different characters and their involvements. And originally my a friend and partner Vincent McDaniel, we've produced and worked on many films together over the last 8 years. And when we first started working together about 8 years ago, he had this concept and story in the first draft of Boneyard because he was inspired from, obviously the West Mesa murders, but he grew up in Albuquerque, and there's a very, um, large issue going on there for decades now with missing indigenous women and children and missing people in general. It's a huge crisis in New Mexico that's been overlooked for years until, the West Mesa murders, case came up with a woman walking a dog one morning on February 9th, 2009, came across these human bones that the dog started digging up. And, she called the authorities and, they started digging up and, they found the 11 remains that opened up a national serial killer case and got the FBI involved. And, that actually shed a lot of light and awareness on other cases that were overlooked for many years, other similar cases.
Right.
So during that time, they were able to also close some cold cases. So just like that, our goal was to always bring the awareness with this story and to possibly help, not only educate people, but maybe someone will come forward with a tip to help close a case or two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about bringing and shedding light on these horrors sometimes, and as difficult that it is and challenging, sometimes it is necessary because you are correct.
Right.
It could only the awareness could only kind of help in the end, and sometimes it has happened in several cold cases, as you've mentioned before. You're working
Right.
with some very high profile actors on this one, the legendary actor and director himself, Mel Gibson. What was it like collaborating with him on this project?
Well, I mean, there's a reason Mel Gibson is a legend and one of the best actors and directors in the world himself. And it was very humbling to work with him at the same time. It was probably the biggest, life lesson, directing lesson, filmmaking lesson I've received. And it was humbling because, he's a humble guy as well. He showed a lot of respect. He showed up to work to collaborate and work. And we had great energy between us. I mean, before we even started working, really, I mean, we sat down one night for dinner and spoke for hours over just life, about everything and anything. And, he made it comfortable. It felt like I've known him for years, even though this was the first time we worked together. And he was meant for the role. I mean, when we were developing the script and writing out each of the roles and envisioning each of the roles, someone like Mel Gibson always came to my mind for the Agent Petrovic role, and it's such a vital senior character in the story, and being the FBI profiler, which is basically like the backbone of a case like this. And we needed somebody of that caliber, and I've always pictured Mel, and we approached him, even though people told me I was crazy to try to approach him. I went for my, you know, original vision, and he came on board, and everything started falling in place. And 50 Cent being the chief of police, that was another very interesting, casting choice. I thought that we see him in a whole different way than we're used to,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
he did a great job.
Yeah, completely different from anything I think I've seen him in beforehand. And tell us about how he was on set. He does have, a handful of acting credits under his belt, but was he ever nervous about a shot or a scene or the dialogue? How was he kind of working with you, or how was he on
No,
set?
I mean, he, obviously, he laughed. I remember, we all kind of, like talked about um how strange it was to see him in that police chief uniform, with all the stripes and the badge and everything. But as soon as we started rolling cameras, he really owned that character. And an interesting day was when we shot the press conference scene when he's, and it's a very heavy and hard scene, emotional scene too, where he's now for the first time publicly, announcing uh, the horrors that were being dug up in this case, with the bodies and everything. And he's first time announcing to the world what this case is. And usually in real life, chief of police, they'll have notes in front of them when, at the podium when they're doing the press release, and they'll look
Sure.
down and up and read. In this case, we gave him that option saying, hey, you could have some notes in front of you if you need to look down, read. But he was so into character, he memorized the entire press conference and just did it. And that was all him performing. So he was very committed into it.
Yeah, love hearing that. Love hearing that. One last question. Mel is such a accomplished director in his own right. You must have tried to absorb as many kind of not tips, but just styles and or strategies as you can from him. Name something that you kind of pulled away from this experience that you're going to carry on with you on future projects from Mel.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there were so many, but one thing I could definitely say is, something that helps not only in filmmaking, but in life in general is how to really recognize people and their characters, by just being yourself with them, just talking to them, having a conversation, something other than movies, talk about life, talk about anything else, just to, get to know them. And there's a 5-minute window where you can really understand, if you're going to be able to work with that person or not, or if you can get along with them, or if you have the same, views or mindset. And I was able to recognize that, I guess, system of being able to truly, being able to recognize character. And one of the things Mel told me is he doesn't normally audition actors. He'll just talk to you for 5, 10 minutes and he'll know what you can and can't do even as an actor. And to me, that
Wow.
was interesting because that's kind of how I am. I hate the auditioning process. And I most times I usually write characters with the actors in mind already, knowing what they can and can't do. Or if an actor's my friend and I know them personally, I already know, what characters they can play. I don't need to audition them. So that to me was very interesting. When he told me then, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm like very similar in that way. So there were definitely a lot of similarities we shared that made it kind of easier and more comfortable for us to work with each other.
I love hearing that. You've done a marvelous job on helping to kind of, again, raise awareness, shedding light where there is darkness. And I think everyone can benefit from hearing about not exactly a dramatization of the West Mesa murders, but a story inspired by those and help to try and bring more light where there is darkness, like I mentioned earlier. Thank you so much for joining me. Boneyard is going to be in select theaters and video on demand on July 5th. Check your local listings. And thank you so much for talking to me today. Fantastic film. Can't wait for everybody to see it.
Thank you.